yeux de lumière qui voient passer au loin les oiseaux.
So it's the last time we meet, and in a way we talked about international human rights, and I come later, a little bit later back to it, saying we talked about international human rights, although we barely talked about rights, meaning international legislation. But before doing this, I come back to something else. I will send you later a quote, which I thought is interesting, although it may be a little bit too difficult to understand in the entire context without understanding or without having read the entire book, or two books actually. It is a comment by Karl Marx on a book written by Hegel on the philosophy of law, where the core of this passage is there is the form and the content. And Marx discusses the relationship between form and content as reflected in Hegel. From Marx, the contribution to Hegel's philosophy of law, written in 1843-1844. Furthermore, with regard to the attitude, the will of the estates, this is suspect, for they issue from the private standpoint and from private interests. The truth is that private interest is their matter of general concern, and that matters of general concern are not their private interest. But what a state of things when matters of general concern assume the form of matters of general concern in a will which does not know what it wants, or at least it does not possess any particular knowledge of the general, and which has its real content an opposing interest. In modern states, as in Hegel's philosophy of law, the true actuality of matters of general concern is merely formal, or only what is formal is an actual matter of general concern. Hegel is not to be blamed for depicting the nature of the modern state as it is, but for presenting that which is as the nature of the state. The problem with it is that we are talking about what we did the entire time. We are talking about the problems of a formal legislative system, meaning laws and acts and provisions like this, on the one hand, and we always, nolens volens, if we want or if we don't want, we think about morals. And morals, you cannot formalize moral systems. You are standing there, you are facing this guy who is standing in front of the door with the axe in the hand, and you cannot formalize in a way this moral decision, the moral dilemma. And this is very important to understand as well what we talked about in terms of different ways, different theories. It was the one which is problem solving. Then you have an immediate problem in front of you, and you have to find a solution for here and now. And this is not a philosophical question, this is a practical question. If I am hungry, I need something to eat. It was kind of funny, I had been buying glasses, lenses, and he said, actually, they are too large. You can only get them in 6.0, but you need 6.5. I said, and? I need 6.5. I cannot make a compromise there because I have to see. And then he said, well, we can make it, but it's more expensive. And for me, it doesn't matter. If I have the money or if I don't have the money, I need the more expensive glasses or lenses. So it is something, if I need bread, I cannot say, as Marie Antoinette said, why don't we eat cake then? And we have, on the other hand, the critical approach, critical theory, that says, what is the situation about? Why did it come to here? What can we do with it? And how can we overcome it in principle? Meaning, I give you money, I give you bread now, this solves the problem at the moment, but tomorrow you will be there again, and you will be starving again. Human rights. It's about, I don't know, 10 minutes ago or something, just before going to class, I received the link from the Swedish bank. Sunday, they awarded the prize that is not the Nobel Prize for Economics, but that is the Royal, it's the Sveriges Riksbank Prize, the prize of the Swedish bank in economic science and in the memory of Alfred Nobel. Mind, if you hear the Nobel Prize in economics, it doesn't exist. It is the prize of a bank. This is a tiny detail which is of interest, but I received now the official decision. This prize had been awarded oh good God, Abhijit Banerjee, Esther Duflo, and Michael Kramer. And I will read from the decision, just briefly. The research conducted by this year's laureates has considerably improved our ability to fight global poverty. In just 2 decades, their new experiment-based approach has transformed development economics, which is now a flourishing field of research. Going on then, despite recent dramatic improvements, one of humanity's most urgent issues is the reduction of global poverty in all its forms. More than 700 million people still subsist on extremely low incomes. Every year, around 5 million children under the age of 5 still die of diseases that could often have been prevented or cured with inexpensive treatments. Half of the world's children still leave school without basic literary and numeracy skills. It goes on and goes on, and it is surely an award given to valuable research. And if you look into the research, if you do economics, development economics, this is actually what happened already since many years. This is now systematized. that you narrow down the problems. You do not speak of poverty, let alone of global poverty, let alone of global inequality, but you speak of children starving to death. You speak of children not continuing school for different reasons. And overcoming these problems is, of course, hugely important. But there is no mention of the real problem of global poverty, and this is global inequality, excessive. And there's a huge research behind it, and there's a huge problem with it, why this is the case, of inequality, where the poverty of some and of many means the affluence, the richness of others. This is not being addressed by such an approach. When you make it possible for children to go to school, this is important. This is important by way of solving a problem. But the critical approach has to go beyond and has to look what is the cause of the problem, what is about inequality, and how can we overcome inequality that stands behind the problem. And of course, this is a political question. Meaning, talking about human rights is a political question. Do you want to solve a problem, or do you want to, and then I come back to the beginning, to maintain forms? The form is clear. It is a legislation, it is a legislative system, it's laws that actually justify poverty. If you look and read the Universal Declaration of Rights, you see exactly this is the continuation of earlier approaches of the citizens, of the working people who are economically active within the system. It is not about something that you may know from your own country. It is especially relevant in many African countries that had been made poor, made extremely poor by being involved in global capitalist economy. They hadn't been rich before, but they managed to get along. Being drawn into this competitive, highly competitive system means there is more to it, and you have to compete now with those who do not allow you to compete with. There's in economics, and in this way, human rights discussion is always as well about economics. There is something that is called value chains. In very broad terms, it means you get a fair share. You get, in the entire process of production, that part that you put into the creation of value. Where it is strange, there, I don't know if one of your countries is involved, China is involved, Korea is involved, Japan is involved. Here in China, the iPhone is assembled. Major part of the production happens here in China. a major part of the profit does not go here, but this goes to the Silicon Valley for design. Now, show me, please, how you make a phone call by design. And show me, please, how you use the internet by design. You need the hardware, you need something assembled, you need something that works. And in the extreme case, it doesn't matter what it looks like. It can be the most ugliest thing, but it works. It does the job, makes phone calls, links to the internet, makes games and all this. Of course, it is nice to have something nice. I would be the last to say it really doesn't matter. But in terms of functionality, in terms of the value of the thing, in terms of what it is used for, it doesn't matter. So again, you have form and content being separated, and it is all about the form. Formally, you get actually with the value chains whatever you contributed, whatever you put into it, in terms of the assemblage, which is not major work. It is a very simple mechanical work. But in terms of value creation, it is the major part. So Benjamin Selden says, forget about value chains, what it is about. It is about poverty chains, because we are producing and permanently, perpetually producing, reproducing poverty. As long as you produce what you produce within the system, you cannot get rich by it. You have to change the entire production, the orientation. Human rights, what is it about? Is it about you produce in a way that suits your needs, or is it about producing in a way that suits the world market, the global market? I think I mentioned that I worked in Australia, and it was up in the northeast, close to PNG. PNG is not Australia, but there is this strong link between the two countries. And we worked actually with people, with groups from PNG. And what happens there is exactly this. They had been rich. They could get along with their own economic resources, with their own economic activities on a low level. They have had one thing that had been hugely important for the global economy, that had been something that had been exported. Timber, wood. And what happened was, I say it in simplified terms, people went there, said, we buy your timber, you get money for it, you get actually reasonably good money for it, and you export the raw material. Of course, then there was in the country a kind of split. Who controls what is sold? Who benefits from this? So you have had a split within the country, a social divide. And in the long run, you didn't have anything anymore. You can grow a tree, but you cannot grow it for tomorrow. So basically what happened, and you all know it under this term deforestation or the destruction of the rainforest. After a while, they simply didn't have any resources anymore to be economically active.
Why did they? Why did they discharge all the trees?
Why
did they cut off all the trees?
Because they sold it. That was the exploitation. You get involved into the global market because you have this short-term profit and the promise this brings development to you, this brings future, this brings wealth. But they do not tell you, actually, you cut off your own legs that you cannot walk anymore afterwards. Now, you can say it's better to walk slowly than not walking at all. And it's better to walk slowly a long distance than making a sprint, a short-term sprint, and then standing there not being able to walk or to run. So this is what happens in many countries, a short-term orientation, exploitation of what is there, exploitation of low-wage situations. And of course it is a promise where you get something out of it. Now, I don't want to bother you with the economic details and comparative advantages, and it goes back that the idea of economics, this kind of economics, is everybody does what he or she can do best. So I will not teach you Russian or Chinese, because I'm very bad in this. I will not even teach you German or English or any language you know, because I'm not trained as a language teacher, but I will teach you law and economics. I don't know if I'm really good in it, but this is what I learned. So, and you, I don't know, let's say you are chef you have one of these stands, and you sell soup or I don't know what, or sexy tea, you won't say, no, listen, before I sell you the tea, we'll do a little bit language course. They may play around and say, well, you don't know what tea is in Chinese, and I'll tell you, and blah, 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 but this is not teaching language. So everybody does what he or she is best in, and this is the same for every country, does what they are best in, and if you have the raw material and nothing else, if you have only cheap labor, this is what you try to sell on the global market, because this is what everybody tells you you have to do. Human rights, forget it. Because human rights would say, now what is the problem really? Is it the situation now where you need income and you will be over the long run poor because you invest here, or is it something where we need a different way of production? Now this can mean different things. I'm very much in favor of, for instance, alternative economics or alternative ways of organizing work, which is about cooperatives. You don't need large enterprises to this extent as we have it today, but organizing work in a different way is something valuable as well. That you say, this is the idea of cooperatives, okay, you have to produce something, you have to generate value, meaning that the bread is on the table next day. But as well, And I go back to the story I heard from a former colleague. It's not about producing bread, but it is about providing a service. So I don't know if you go to the hairdresser or if you cut your hair yourself, or how you manage this task. So she comes originally from Africa, I don't know exactly where, and she said, when we get our hair done, this takes 1 day. And it is not about getting the hair done, but it is a social event. You have a meal together, you chat together, you exchange news. It is like a festival, 1 day festival. All the women come to this place and they celebrate. And so the one thing is you just produce haircut, 5 minutes. The other way is you have all the social contacts as part of it. You talk, again, showing you how far this goes. You talk about the education of your children. You talk about your naughty boy and naughty daughter who are doing this and that. And somebody else says, listen, do you know what I do? I brought up now these 8 children. I think I found a trick. Try this. So it's an educational service as well. It's not only cutting hair. It's baking bread on top of cutting the hair or making the hair. It's so many different things, and you can say as well, and there it's getting to the industrial stage, you build cars in a large factory, but you can say as well, we are building a car in a cooperative setting, same amount of cars, it doesn't matter. But you do not build cars as such, you make at the same time sure that they are environmentally friendly. So it's not the highest output, but it's the highest quality of the output. The working conditions. You say cooperation is something about a social process of work. It's not everybody, I don't know if you ever saw this film Modern Times with Charlie Chaplin. If not, watch it. It's one of these tragic comedies or whatever, well, it's not really a tragic comedy, but where you see this poor Charlie is completely absorbed by the machines. There is the eating machine, so I don't know, 12 o'clock he has to go to this machine. It's newly introduced there, and they show the test how it works, and then he eats, meaning there is some mechanism going up in front of him, and eating means it shovels the food into his mouth, and he doesn't have even time properly to chew. And then at some stage he's going into the machine and the cog wheels and being basically eaten up by it. So this is the one thing, meaning after a while he is sick, he is burned out, he is not able to work anymore. Or you have a cooperative way. You say working conditions are important. It's not only that you need a break, but it is the entire setting. It is looking after you, that I see you have a problem. Just let's go. Let's talk about this. This has time. We don't have to produce this now. Your problem is more important because your problem is in this case not one I want to solve immediately, but your problem is one from the setting. I have to change something there. This is what human rights is about as well, and I'm not sure if it's Article 23 or 27 or something. If you go to the Universal Declaration, you find there exactly this problem of defining basically everybody has the right to work. And if you go through the entire text, it means you have the right to be employed. Now, I'm very much in favor of the right to be employed, but I dare to ask, is this really everything? So you have employment as the immediate work on socio-economic resources, meaning I need something to eat and I have to produce this, and this means I have to produce it personally, but as well we have to produce it as a society. Then you would have something that you can say it is about inclusion, because it is not about everybody producing for him herself, but it is as well about people getting included into society, because it is a society that is relevant, where it's not only about resources, but it is about the wider field of producing the social setting. Which means as well, it's about cohesion. What I mentioned earlier, this excessive inequality we have, unbelievable if you look at the figures, this is definitely not about cohesion. Even if these people give donations to you, this is not about cohesion. You need rights that if you are sick, you do not depend on the church, on Mr. What's his name, Bill Gates or whatsoever, but you have the right to get health service. Cohesion means having at least some level of equality as well. And then you would have empowerment in terms of education, that you can do something, that you can determine, going back to Kant, that you can determine what you do, that you can use your own brain. You can use another approach. This is called roughly social equality. It's a very complex approach, going much further than this. You can use another approach by Frida Honk, where she says, yes, indeed, it is about employment. It's about economic resources. Basically, what she does is she separates life into 4 areas, and part of it is about you work for income. Part of it is reproduction, bringing up children, looking after the elderly, after your parents, or looking after your partner and yourself. Not egoistically, but as part, again, of this social, societal setting. And then you would have politics from below. This is not about politics in the strict sense as we usually understand it, but it is about engaging in your community. And then you would have something like voluntary work, meaning providing services for others in terms of, again, a service, delivering a service to the community. If you are very strict in the interpretation of the Universal Declaration, it focuses on this, possibly utilizes the other areas, meaning you have to be educated to work. In this way, there is an interest in education, but it is not the interest in education for the sake of education. It is a means to the end. Now we have this, without any question, hugely important Universal Declaration, and we have other instruments developed afterwards, later, and now unstuck in a way to say this is the human rights law. Because this is what we usually say, this is the human rights law. We have legal documents, and they serve as a basis, as a foundation, that if I say, sorry, you are female, just leave. You are not supposed to take part in teaching, in higher education. Sorry, you are Muslim, this is a Christian environment, or this is an atheist environment. You are not supposed to be part of this class. Or you are gay. We are not living in a gay society, so please leave. These are some reasons mentioned as reasons you should not be discriminated against because of religious reason, of gender, of sex, of sexual orientation, and others. This is written down, and if you say, well, sorry, I feel discriminated because of my belief, my sexual orientation or whatsoever, you cannot go to the Human Rights Court and say, well, sorry, there's something wrong. I bring this person, bring this institution to court. One of the difficulties, I said, to talk about human rights law, we talked about her later, last time. Do you remember her? Her name? Marianne? Well, Marianne was her colleague from the French Revolution, but her name is Justitia. Going back actually to the much before that revolution, and Justitia having being blindfolded and having the scale, she doesn't look at who you are and what you are. She looks at the case, at the information she gets, and assesses and judges accordingly. And this is justitia, this is about justice. This is about, yes, it is not just, it is not justified that this discrimination happens. This is what justitia does in your village. If you have a justitia there, if you have a court there, she does it on the regional level, on the national level, and on the global level in terms of the Human Rights Court. But there is one important thing she lacks.
She what?
She lacks, she doesn't have.
She lacks?
Lacks. Lacking. She doesn't have, she doesn't have. That's the sword. We talked earlier on nation states, on the right to have rights, and the need of the state as an instrument, basically, to handle justice. If you are acting against the law, no cases down here, then the state and nobody else can bring you to court, can after being brought to court, can bring you to prison, can punish you, whatever the punishment is, according to the rule of law, but it is the state who can do it. I cannot do it, you cannot do it in a legitimate way. But I have to have a prison. That's the problem. And this is what the state has and nobody else has in terms of an instrument to make sure that this judgment is implemented. And this is what the human rights, the entire system of human rights does not have. It has a kind of law, but you may say, and this can be contested in different ways, but at the end of the day it's correct, you can say a law does not exist without the power of implementing it, and in this way there is no human rights law linked or immediately part of the global system. So what actually happens is you have the Universal Declaration. This is, if you want, the basic law, the constitution of what human rights are about. And then you have, if you want, sub-laws, specific laws, covenants and others, that regulate individual cases in terms of specific problems. Children, or resolutions as well, how to deal with war prisoners. And it's kind of, well, I don't know the correct term really. It's not funny, but you would say it's funny. It's funny to see how civilized war prisoners are dealt with. In the former times, in the medievals, you would have said, war prisoners just cut the throat, that's it. Now, as war prisoners, you have certain rights, and they are regulated, in resolution. I don't know exactly the number. You have a huge number of different legal instruments. And I hesitate there. On the one hand, there are legal instruments, but there are only legal instruments, or made to real legal instruments, by two processes. The one is the ratification. Meaning, if the United Nations, let's take this as the body, there are others like the ILO or whatsoever, but if you take this and they sit down and they decide, this is the document, protection of children, human rights for children, and. It doesn't mean anything in legal terms as long as it is not ratified by the member states. Meaning they are sitting down in Vienna, in New York or wherever. There is a long process of getting to these documents where NGOs are involved and different actors. And then you have this decision, yes, there's a new resolution. I don't know the latest ones, but on food protection. Genetically modified food will be surely on the agenda since recently. Environmental issues, sustainability. Then you sit down, you have this document, and then it goes to the member states, and they have, in their own way, to do two things. The first and basic thing, without this you can forget anything in this area as a legally relevant issue, they have to ratify this document. Meaning they have to sign, basically, the document that had been agreed upon. Without the national ratification, you can say it doesn't exist. It's not legally relevant. Having said it doesn't exist means that we have to qualify this again, because on the one hand, it is legally not worth the paper on which it is written, but it is an instrument, you may call it symbolic policies, where you can say, look, this had been decided. People had been sitting together from 160-something states saying this is an important issue. And you, my government, you don't do anything. You don't build schools, you don't look for education, you don't look for medical services as you could do, as you should do. So what is your justification? In this way, it's not legally relevant, but it is relevant in terms of symbolical policies. And the other thing is that you have, of course, with the ratification, the second leg, if you want, that plays a role, that with the ratification, the member states, the individual member states, have to find a way to implement this general legal text into their national legislation. Again, somewhat problematic that you have to define what does it mean in your country. Then you have something that is legally relevant, but only to some extent, not in the strict sense, because the sword is missing. You have a process of, so we have here symbolic ratification, if you want, translation into national law, and then you would have as a next step the permanent check. You have reports where certain bodies, and there are alternative reports as well then, certain bodies say, now let's look what it really looks like. You have these papers, you obliged yourself to deliver health services, you obliged, or your country is obliged with these documents to treat war prisoners in a way that respects their dignity. But you have, I always forget the name exactly, you have Guantanamo Bay, this part of Cuba which is occupied by the United States and where they permanently abuse and misuse war prisoners. They even admit it. And then the problem in a way is that as far as you have legal instruments, there are only, and only doesn't downplay the role of this, there are only relevant for the relationship between citizens and states. If I disrespect your human rights, you can go to the local court, different courts in the country, but these are not issues of human rights in the strict sense. They would be relevant in possibly that the anti-discrimination that is laid down here is derived from the global level. But first and foremost, this is not a human rights case in the strict sense. This is a civil law case where you are bringing me to court because of disrespecting your human rights, or where your group is going against another soccer club and say they are not properly observing the rules because they are, we allow women to play with us, they don't. No, I don't, if this is a relevant case, but these are civil law cases. They become relevant in legal terms in this sense that the state actually has to provide non-discrimination. The state has to make sure that women get the same education, that being gay, being Christian, I have the same right as the person who is heterosexual, who is non-religion or whatsoever. The state has to make sure that certain conditions are fulfilled. And this is, of course, something that is extremely difficult. In individual cases, you usually can reasonably deal with these cases. But what is, and this is a typical example playing a role here, what is with child labor? Children have to go to work, are forced, in a way forced to work due to their economic situation and due to this is what enterprises offer. Footballs, shoes, runners, Nike, Adidas, Boss suits, t-shirts. If you go to shops, you are wondering how is it possible to produce some stuff for such a price. I've been once in Turkey. We visited a factory producing carpets. I have to say, most beautiful carpets. Most expensive.
We haven't been in my country.
Hmm?
In my country, it's officially the most expensive.
We
have the biggest carpet in the world, handmade.
Handmade.
Yes, it's like,
yeah.
I don't know, 25 meters.
But
it's the most expensive. It's real difficult to get out.
I remember they have had a very small one, which was about, I guess, this size, for about 40,000 euro. You are not used to euro, but this is a huge amount of money.
Yeah, I know, it's like a little bit more than $1. It's like $50,000.
And what happened, we went there, we had been shown how they are produced, and we had been shown then the carpets, and this was this tiny one. And I say it, they show it in front of you, that it turns around, and what really fascinated me with this tiny carpet was the color play. It was just beautiful, the different colors from where the light goes, and just magic. The money goes to the designer. I can imagine that it is difficult to design. And only little money goes to the children who work, who knit this. And they said, this work, these very small knots can only be produced by children. The hands of an adult are too large to work this and to work this fast. They showed us the production of it, slow motion. When they worked, not the children, but the adults as well, I just saw something like standing. You couldn't see, you saw there is movement, but you couldn't see anything. It was so fast.
It takes like 6 months to 1 year to make one carpet, handmade carpet.
And it takes them about 5 years to get blind.
Blind?
And this is the problem. This is, well, I don't know in 5 years, but they said with 20 they are gone. They are blind, or they have such a bad sight that they cannot work anymore. Not in the carpet production, not in anything else. I don't know actually why they have to look, because it's so fast that I didn't understand this, but they have to. And this is then coming back to cooperatives. Is it about producing these beautiful carpets in a fast way with ruining the health of the children, or is it providing a setting where I could even imagine that it makes fun to produce it on your own terms and to be part of this artistic process. So in this way, coming back to child labor, you have a problem with child labor. Now let's go back. The carpet production is a specific one, but let's go back to runners, to shoes, to t-shirts. It's not Adidas, it is Adidas. So there are many profiting from this. What happens? They buy the stuff in a low-wage country where they employ children, but actually they don't, because they have a contract with another enterprise, with a local one, and this local enterprise of course, doesn't employ children. There is somewhere at the end of the chain, there is a company employing children. And they are actually, in a way, happy that they get the job, because otherwise they would be starving to death. So how to figure out, in terms of human rights law, who is responsible? Adidas not. Adidas can show you the contract, actually written down, most likely, explicitly, no child labor involved in the production of our products. And if you go down the chain, there's always this gap between what you see and what you get. It's extremely difficult, at least, to find the responsible instance, the responsible enterprise, who is or that is employing child labor. No, you got them. It's an enterprise Z, and they definitely employ child labor, and they definitely deliver to O and X and N, and they deliver some stage to A. Now you found this. Who is responsible in terms of the stage? I don't know, perhaps you know Adidas, where they are located? The headquarters, it doesn't matter. It's in country A, like Adidas country. So you go to the government of country A and say, listen, your company, Adidas, not your company, but the country in your country, is breaching human rights law because they are employing child labor. This is sorted out in 5 minutes because they don't. They have the contract there. No child labor. Then you can say, but we know there is child labor involved. So we go to country, what was it? No, Z, I think, where this company employs children, and it is known that they employ children. And you go to the government of country Z, they will say, well, we cannot really control them because they are not breaching local law. Or actually, we did not ratify this declaration. So sorry about this. And there is no sword. If you bring this to the Human Rights Court, there is no sword that can say, cut, this is the end of the story. We will be obliged not only to stop it, but as well to pay compensation also. What happens there in terms of paying compensation or whatsoever, this is then a matter, again, of the national law that, of course, depends on the human rights law, if you want, on the global level, on the international level, but it is not directly linked. Then you would have actually, in many cases, probably an endless quarrel between the different instances, that you have the national level, you have the national court, you have the different parties involved in the cases, and then they will always try to say, yes, listen, This is the problem, but it is not really our problem, it is a problem here. And it is, coming back to the beginning, it is the problem here that Adidas, that Nike, that Bosch, that Apple and all these companies make a huge profit. And these are the super rich who cause poverty and maintain poverty. Now, I can have measures, and they are important. I can use the law as it exists to say, okay, we make sure that instead of working, these kids go to school. And for this, I have to break it down and, going back to this price, and have to find measures, problem solutions. I can manage to bring these kids to school. I talked earlier about it, because I make sure that the family has an income, meaning they don't have to work. There is an income going to the family, and they do not depend on their child to work. That's a problem solution. It's hugely important, and you have some kind of legal basis for this. But it is not really the fundamental problem solution. The fundamental problem solution is something, and then think about it, and we have to think about the solution there, that the shoes, I don't know what they cost today. Let's say they cost 100 yuan or 100 euro or whatever. If you calculate all this that is necessary into it, you will probably pay about 10,000 for it. So we have to change the entire system there. You can check it on the internet, the real price of a burger or something. Check for it. Search for this. It actually, it's a serious calculation, and at the same time it's not really too serious, because it's exactly this impossibility, showing this impossibility. The real price of a burger has to include the health cost, the medical treatment of the people who eat this junk food permanently and get sick by it. And it is a serious issue that you can see actually here in China, as far as I heard, that McDonald's, KFC, and then you have others, they came to China, they brought fancy food, or what some people thought is fancy food, and they brought obesity, they brought bad eating conditions, and they brought something that is not in the tradition of traditional nutrition. You have actually one country that is an interesting human rights case. You have one country where, I think it was Bolivia, where McDonald's opened one shop and tried, they always try with one shop and then they expand, that's the idea. They opened this one shop and they closed it. That's the only country where McDonald's closed down instead of expanding. The reason, a multifold reason, you find a film on the internet actually in Spanish. The reason was multifold. The one, it was too expensive. This food is fancy, what we call fancy. you want to be part of this world. So you want to buy this. But it was too expensive for many people to buy it. And then there was another major group that actually said, coming back to something I said earlier, meaning getting the hair done in a way, nutrition, eating, is not about the intake of calories. This is, of course, important. I don't know, minimum of 1,000 calories, I think, per day. That's really the minimum. But this is only one thing. It's a social act. It's coming together. It's part of the culture. And even in your small group, you will probably know the differences, even if you come from more or less from one region. You will recognize the differences. In Laos, they eat in a different way than in Vietnam, and even in Hunan, they eat in a different way than they do in other provinces. It's part of the culture. Preparing the meal is part of the culture. Socializing over the meal is part of the culture. And all this has to be included into these calculations, and was not calculated into or brought into this calculation by McDonald's. They said, we open in Bolivia. The Bolivians said, no, sorry, just go away. We have our own culture, and we insist that this is a human right, not only to get something to eat, but to produce our food and to produce our life, if you want, in the way that we want to do it. Not fast food, not junk food, but good, I don't know, let's assume good, or what they understand as a good social meal. So that's it for the moment in terms of showing you the complexity, and by way as well to say there is no legal basis that you can say, well, but sorry, McDonald's opens here and this ruins my stomach. Forget it. In this way, human rights law, international, does not exist. Whatever you can do is based on how is it in the national context implemented, what do they make actually with the ratification. So you have all the lectures, you will get this hopefully as well distributed, I guess. Go through it again. Not because they are so excellent, but I think still there is something in it that you can get, and you can get another little bit when you listen to it the second time and third time, and kind of make up your own, not your own knowledge, but your own understanding based on this. And
Comme un enfant aux yeux de lumière qui voit passer au loin les oiseaux. Comme l'oiseau bleu survolant la terre, voit comme le monde